And I was very confused. It was like, well, are you like this metalhead? Are you a deadhead? Are you good Christian boy?
Hello and welcome to the Mindset and Self-Mastery Show. I'm your host, Nick McGowan. Today on the show, I have Chad Prevost. Chad, how you doing today?
I am doing really well. I've just come back from an intentional pilgrimage to Ireland with David White on a walking tour. And then I took our middle son to a college orientation in Lexington, Kentucky, and I'm back and I'm recovered from jet lag. So I'm doing really well. Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm glad that you're here, and I'm a bit jealous about you going to Ireland as a Mick. I'm a McGowan. I haven't actually been over there yet. And some people have asked, are you Irish, you Scottish? And, in that sort of section of the world, I don't know. I think they just drank and procreated for a long time. So not entirely sure, but at some point I'm going to get over there. How was that trip?
Really rewarding. Yes, we do have Shelley and my wife and I do have ancestry from there, and don't really know how to trace it all, but there was the sense of we had always wanted to go to Ireland, and we just kind of manifested it, made it happen, and it was a celebration of our 25th anniversary as well. So it was just a really special time. And David White, by the way, that's Whyte, for those who don't know him, is he's a poet. He's from Ireland and England. His dad's from England, his mom's from Ireland, I believe. He lives in Seattle. And for 30 consecutive years now, he has been going on an annual pilgrimage, taking groups there, and he has the experience dialed in. Yeah, 30. He's been doing it since he's 38. Now he's 68. Wow. Right?
You'd think after 30 years that you should have it figured out. But then again, that's also part of the reason why we have this podcast, is because we as people are still trying to figure this stuff out. And you and I were riffing a little bit about that before we hit record. That there's just a lot of similar things and stuff that we can get into. So why don't you kick us off? Tell us what you do for a living and what's one thing that most people don't know about you that's maybe a little odd or bizarre.
I'm a coach, and I do transformation coaching. It's a lot of ontological kind of work, connecting the body, the emotions, and the head, which is very universal and versatile through with all the kinds of frameworks and different kinds of great coaching that's out there. We do use a lot of the Enneagram. I'm also a poet. I am also a retreat and workshop facilitator.
I know we also talked a little bit about music, and you're trying to tickle the ivories a little bit right now too, right?
Yeah, I'm an okay musician, but I do feel like music is in my blood, and I never wanted to let it go. So I've just kind of held on to it, playing, a little guitar or bass, or now working on some keys, playing with my brother, playing in a little band here in Chattanooga, just kind of connecting to it, not trying to do anything too big.
Yeah, well, once it's in your blood, I don't really think most people can get away from it. You're a musician, or you feel the music. Like, I've even had friends in the past where they're like, I'm done playing, but it's like, even if they're done playing, they'll still listen to something and go, oh my God, do you hear this? Do you hear how this worked? And you're like, yeah, I feel it. So what's that thing that's a little odd or bizarre?
If poet wasn't weird enough to people in our culture, when I was 17, I was in a heavy metal band, and the band said, we are going to go get tattoos downtown. And I was like, all right, I'm the firstborn of a Baptist minister, and I was in a heavy metal band. And we went in the whole band, all five of us, stuffed in a 57 Chevy. It's true. It's not just, it doesn't just sound good. And we were in Richmond, Virginia. We drove to downtown downtown Richmond, where I knew of a tattoo parlor called Lizards. And I suppose, ironically enough, I knew of this because it was right next door to First Baptist Church, where my family would take us. And so I'm underage. I'm not legal to do it. But the lead singer, the handsome lead singer who couldn't sing very well, he got a tattoo. And so who was second in line? I was next. And I got 3 roses. 3 roses, and had no meaning, just like, it looked kind of good. Yeah, let's get 3 roses on my deltoid. And then what happened? It was 5 o'clock in the evening, and the other guys were like, yeah, I guess we're out of time. I don't know, maybe we'll come back. And they never got their tattoos. So I went on and lived my life since 17 with that not very good tattoo. And everyone told me different ideas of how to apply, like, how could you combine those? And I was like, I think I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to stop while I'm ahead there.
Don't make it worse. I've seen some people try to like cover things up, and it can be really done, really well. But some that can be like, what is that blob? What happened?
Right. Lots of different meaning making we've tried to do about it. Different guys. Some guys said put guns with it and have guns and roses. Some guys, my fraternity guys said, hey, put purple with it and make it the fraternity flag. I just left it alone. And it is a story and a weird thing from here on out.
You and I talked a little bit about intuition, and it feels to me like you're probably one of those people where you're like, if intuitively you're moved in a direction, you would do it. Like if somebody made some sort of choice for you that was like, hey, what about this? And you felt it, you probably would have done it. But if you didn't have that intuition pull, then don't do it. And that's cool of you to be able to do that. And I think that that probably also gets into the Enneagram. Like I'm a 4-3, so I feel every friggin' thing. And my intuition is a big part of the way that I operate. Talk to us a little bit about how you got into the Enneagram and what you are. Maybe start with the number.
Okay. Yeah, sure. And maybe I can even connect the quirky little fact to be taking us a little bit deeper, as I know you want to go in a short amount of time, which, I could talk a little bit about some of my struggles in adolescence and what some of that yielded for me. I'm an Enneagram 4. We talk in terms of growth with the Enneagram. We often are like, well, I understand that you can kind of lean into a given wing and that can kind of describe someone a little bit more, but we use the subtypes, whether you're maybe a little bit more of a sexual, self-preservation, or social, and that is really a huge flavor that it gives your actual type. So I am a sexual 4, and the sexual instinct, that's my dominant instinctual, the way it is distorted through my personality lens. So that is a little bit, I'm a 4 that isn't like as sad as the stereotypical 4. I've been in this character, I can be more of an angry 4, a little bit more of an intense 4, which can sometimes look a little 8ish. And perhaps it is that very intensity that I brought, there in my unaware 17-year-old self that was just ready to just jump in and just, get marked and do it for the band. So yeah, I don't know. The Enneagram is a fascinating, man. We could talk the whole podcast and then some on the Enneagram. It's a transformative, powerful typology that's more than any other typology. That it's because the work that's been done behind it, looking at motivations, it truly transformative, and that's why we use it. I will say that, that really unaware, wounded 16, 17-year-old who's really confused, didn't know who he was really an envy. The 4, right, was this angry envy of like I'm going to like show everyone. And so I really pushed against my parents, and my intense dad, and in my own intense way, and it just kept getting me into trouble. So it wasn't as effective as my Enneagram 7 brother. He had it figured out with lightness and humor. You can do all the things that your big brother's doing, but you can get away with it
Mm-hmm.
rather than pushing against. So, I smoked, I mean, everything's relative, but I got into smoking a fair amount of pot in high school whenever I could get it. And whenever I could get inexpensive LSD, I was doing a lot, and I was very confused. It was like, well, are you like this metalhead? Are you a deadhead? Are you good Christian boy? Like I kept trying to, I was in cross country for a while, but the long and short is that it led me to getting a little bit of a chronic bronchitis. And my parents were just so, I had quit kind of everything. They were so concerned, they said about me at the beginning of a little bit after the tattoo. They, at the beginning of my senior year, they put me in a hospital, and I was kind of tricked into that. And they were like, yeah, we're just going to see a counselor and about an assessment. And next thing, the guy was like, well, yeah, Chad needs to be hospitalized. And I happened to have pot on me at the time, and I like hid it in and took it into the hospital with me, which led to another whole drama. But I got into there, and this is the complexity of it all. I got into the thing, and I was so angry and so sure that I didn't need to be in there. They said, you're here for a minimum of 30 days. And I was like ready to like fight and like tell them how wrong they were for it. But then when I learned that, I was like, you know what I'll do is I'll play the game, and my revenge will be that I will come out unchanged, but I will fool them. And in a way, that is kind of how it worked. I said, okay, I'll get my hair cut. I'll follow these 12 steps. I'll do all the things that you're telling me to do. And I did get educated in it. But I also was like, internally, I was like, just fuck you to everybody. And that, Nick, I would say that we don't have to pursue that with, that whole narrative with too much depth, but there was this, I went through a period of really needing to prove myself in college and then in graduate school. And yeah, it's that has been that like dealing with the father, the struggle, of like, do you comply with what they want, or do you rebel, or do you find your own soulful way? That definitely was an early adulthood, mostly early adulthood into middle adulthood. I don't know where I am. I think I'm in middle adulthood, struggle. And yeah, so I don't know. To bring it all the way up, and I ended up becoming. I went to seminary. I did a Ph.D. in creative writing poetry. I became a professor, a tenure track professor in English and writing, and I did that all for about a decade. And it was fine, but it wasn't what I thought it would be. And so I loved teaching, but I didn't love that system that I was in. And it wasn't manifesting in the dreams or what I was wanting it to be, to like be a well-known writer, poet. And so I left it. And so a lot of the 20 teens was writing, um and trying to make it still as a writer. There was a lot of anger and irritation in me, and not a lot of consciousness. Didn't know I was an Enneagram 4. I would have thought that I was very, very much a head type, because I think that, yeah. So to bring it all the way up to about 2019, I had been in a startup, a freight and logistics startup, where I was proud that I was like supporting the family by being a writer. I was being a trade journalist, and it led to some podcasting and broadcasting, which was all just fun, as long as there was just distractions and like new things I didn't have to confront or deal with, this isn't who you are. And so around 2019, I kept getting frustrated with it. And my wife, who had been burned out and on her own journey, was ready to launch a new thing. And I was like, and we were like, why don't we do this together? Big self school. And I was, she had a background as a counselor. And I said, well, I'll be your like media person. I'll be your content, your R&D. And that's how it began. And it started with learning this Enneagram. And I became so interested in it that I started getting certified in it. And it led to coaching. And I was like, that is a gift or a bit of a calling that had been denied in me probably through all of this, like wanting to express myself and wanting to be understood as the four wants to be, and to this yielding and like saw and like and receiving and listening. Whole like a superpower of the four is handling difficult emotions, so we are cut out for that. And that has been it's been transformative. I would say I've had a huge 5-year transformation.
There's an immense
That's a
amount of
lot,
stuff in
man.
that.
I'm trying to connect a lot of dots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot. You do a great job of being able to point out the different pieces that were juxtaposition and how you saw, or at least look back at and go, oh, this is where this worked and how I look at it this way. If we all knew the Enneagram from years and years and years ago, or even when we were younger, it'd be a vastly different story. There are people that listen to this podcast that are familiar with the Enneagram. There are some that have no idea what the hell we're talking about. It's not some alt version of Instagram. And then there are other people that really know every single thing, what they are. And I think this is a great topic for us to go into. I'm like you. I'm a sexual 4. And for those listening that don't understand that, does not mean we're nymphomaniacs. It's it's the type of energy. But for us to be able to understand how different energy types and Enneagram types affect us or interact with us, we can feel everything. I believe we are the closest to the void where we can step on either side. My partner, Stephanie, she's a 4/5, and she can live in the void and go super deep and live just down in the depths of the ocean and come back whenever she's ready. And sometimes it's really difficult for people to be able to pull themselves back. And people that are outside of us, like you said, we can sometimes be as an angry 4, we can sometimes turn into an 8. I've often thought of myself, that's not where we disintegrate to, but I've thought of myself as having 8 tendencies because both my mom and dad were 8s. And when I learned about the Enneagram, I was like, that is why I get so heady with things, and probably similar to you, where you think that you have to think these ways, but in all reality, we have to feel these ways first. So for you to get to the point where you're at with the business that you have with your wife, and for you to feel like this is the calling that you've had, that's a big thing. And that's really one of the main things that we talk about on this show. As one of the co-founders and head of Disruption for Choose Your Calling, it's about purpose work, and it's about actually knowing what your calling is, but actively choosing it. And you literally were in that spot where you got to choose it because you're like, this doesn't feel right. And as a 4, we can feel when something's off. But in the systems that we're involved in, we feel like we have to go do those things. And I think for the most part, we can all kind of put our face on and go do the damn thing. But if it's not actually the right thing for you, then you're hurting yourself. But it can be difficult to be able to pull yourself out of that and kind of get on the path you needed to. So talk with us a bit about that angle where you actually went, this doesn't feel right. Oh, this feels great. And being able to actually go down that path.
Okay. That's a great question. Let's see, to tiny bit back up, and because I can't, I have an immediate answer, but to your wife's, I can, whether it's of being a 4 wing 5, I don't know, but yes, that withdrawing stance of the 4 and the 5 have a withdrawing stance at times from the world. And I've been through this cycle and pattern enough times to finally like stop it, but I'll get this intense, it'll be an intellectual and an emotional combo I'll have this intense desire to write something powerful, and so it could be a book of poetry, but it's also been other book projects. And I'll do this withdrawing where I'm just like, everybody leave me alone so I can go deep and write this profound thing, and but then you've done the thing and you come up for air and you're like, hey world, here's this thing that I've been working on that I want to share with everybody because it's amazing, and there's no one around because you've been withdrawing from everyone. And so I have been through that cycle a few times. And so as a professor, there was this natural platform, a natural audience always there. You just get to like go back and, hey, there's the students, and you didn't have to create an audience, or as it were. And I've now kind of experienced a few times over this. Well, there's a whole half of my calling that was cut off, and I didn't always know how to engage with the world that way. And I would say even up to very recently, I have to talk about calling and soul, and the blending of it all, like being on the second mountain journey is, if only it were so easy as to just say, I am just leading with my soul. I am just going to listen to my call. And it just doesn't matter what the ego is trying to say. Because if only it were, maybe, I don't know, for some people they can't, because the soul doesn't care about the outcomes, right? The soul is like, go try this. And if it doesn't work out, I don't care. I want to try this. And the ego is like, well, wait a minute, like, let's have a strategy. let's understand the marketplace. And so there is, I think, the complicating factor is, we do still need the ego. We need strategy. But the way that I really distinguish some of this, it's a really helpful thing. It's almost I will say, Nick, so the idea of like the difference between surrender and control. And surrender is this almost embodied way of yielding and letting go. Uh, and that's where I feel like I'm being in the stream of soulfulness and connecting to call. And any sniff or hint of wanting to be in control of it, at least I can recognize, how much the ego is present there at the time. So, but a really helpful, it was a scary moment. It was almost a year ago to the day. I almost drowned. July 22nd. So the recording of this, I don't know if I should date this, but the recording is July 12th. Almost a year ago to the day, I was in a paddleboarding incident on the Ocoee River with my brother and a friend. And we were getting off, and it was like the current was strong. And I was at first, I had taken off my Ph.D. because it had been such a chill, beautiful day. But it was like pretty high up. It was like neck deep, and I was off my board, and I just kind of was getting pulled down the current a little bit. And my leash, that my foot was connected to my leash, it started getting caught up in something beneath me. And I was holding on to the board, and I began to realize that I was flagging. I was getting tired really fast. I wasn't going to be able to keep holding on to the board. And and that was the first time where I just said help. But they weren't going to be able to get to me because of the power of the current between us. And without detailing it all in excruciating detail, like there was a moment where I was like, well, I'm going under, and I'm drowning this way, holding on to the board. I don't know what to do. I could not reach down with the current. I didn't have enough, whatever, strength, breath to get to the Velcro leash and free myself. So, in desperation and knowing there wasn't anything else to do, I let go of the board and just let myself go with the current of the river. And even then, I was still I was bobbing up and down and like underneath the water coming back up. It was going up my nose. I was like, my body was fighting with everything it had instinctually. And as I was looking up at the sky, I was beginning to I was freaked out, but I was also like, okay, so this could really be it. These are your last maybe moments of consciousness. And there were the things that were flashing through my mind were like, you wasted so much time being anxious about things you shouldn't have worried about. You shouldn't have worried about your oldest son so much. You wasted so much time being afraid to speak in front of groups. You lived in all this fear, and you shouldn't have denied your calling. You should have been writing. Like these thoughts were like flashing through my mind. And uh and then something happened that had zero control that I did or anybody else. My leash just snapped. It broke off my board, and I just kind of began to float a little bit up, and I couldn't believe it, and I still had to swim, and my feet were so exhausted. My shoes and my bathing suit were the only thing that everything else, my ring, everything had just was gone. The board was gone. And I swam to the side, and the animal body was just doing this breathing that I couldn't even believe. Like and it just went on and on and on, me trying to catch my breath. And I remember looking up at the sky and thinking, everything that happens next is a second chance. That how ordinary and how completely possible I could have just drowned right there. But Nick, so even with that experience of that idea, it really connects with me. If I share this in a group at times, I will just start crying. But it was that holding on, that holding on to whatever it is that we think we can control, and then the really embodied feeling of surrendering to the current, really it will stick with me forever. But I was going to say, with that said, life kind of returns to normal, right? And it's like, and you're like, yeah, a while ago I almost drowned. Well, the bills are due and the mortgage is due, and and so I think, to connect it back to the very thing we were saying, is like, I was really, really ready. I've been doing intentional work all year long, but nothing was quite sticking in a real resonant way, until I went on this, what David White specifically called a pilgrimage. We're all on a pilgrimage, I would hope. Even if we feel lost, you don't always know where you're. In fact, pilgrimages, you're lost a lot. Um, but he, to not only experience the actual retreat and how great that was, to be in a community of about 40 other people on this, experiencing these places, but to actually see someone like a David White lead as a poet, and to be a poet who is who didn't worry about where all his publications were, and who's writing poetry that speaks to other people's needs, in the soulful way that attracts people who are, everyone's suffering, and we're hungry for something. And for him to lead in the authenticity of being a poet, being masterful and as a storyteller. And he goes into businesses and he talks about soul. So like I was just so doubly convicted in a really a way that I was ready for. Because I haven't written poetry since 2014, literally a decade of casting off that self, shoving it into the shadows, and almost like in the shame of like, you thought you were going to be this like big time poet, like, how naive and how pretentious, sort of. And then the soul part is like saying it's like it's asking to be integrated, that shadow side, right? um you can stay grounded and be none don't be pretentious, right? Yeah, be humorous, right? Because nobody does know the answers. Hold some things lightly, but lead. And so I think maybe this is, I talked about the withdrawing thing that I've done. What I am so ready to embark on now is really move the energy that feels really right, rather than like, I do feel called to write a next book, but it's like that's not just it. It's not just this withdrawal. It is more of this like, I want to share. I know there's a need, and I am ready to facilitate deeper learning experiences for others. So that's what I'm stepping into even more.
What a weird thing when you're about to die and you have all of that that goes through you. And some people listening to this podcast may have experienced that. Others may have not ever experienced anything close to it. But even having something like that, and then literally days or a week later, and you're like, oh shit, I got to pay the bills. No, we got to do this. What are we going to do for dinner? Like, what dumb things. But what a beautiful human thing that is, where you can almost bounce back. I believe that that trauma is still living in your cells unless you process through it, because the body keeps a score, as Bessel has said. But being able to understand that there are things that you can either let go of and surrender to, or that you can try to control. When I hear that from you or from anybody, or even from myself, when I'm trying to control something, it's a sense of wanting to know that I have it, that I can handle the thing. When in all reality, the thing that you needed to do was actually let go. You're still going to bob, you're going to go up and down, but being able to actually just let go, it doesn't mean that you release yourself from everything, where it's like, sometimes people can say, well, if I just let go of everything, then how am I going to pay the bills? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Like, you don't really know. I don't have that answer. You clearly don't. But you
Yeah.
will figure it out as you go. Something that has really convicted me over the past, let's say, year or so, is the shoulds of life. Life should look a certain way. I should be at this stage of my life at this age. I should do this. I should do that. Or I shouldn't, or what have you. And that's a bunch of bullshit, because it doesn't actually work out that way. When you can have that sense of balance where you can control the things that you can control that are within your energetics, and then there are the things that you just need to let go and surrender to, that's really the beauty of life. And for you to be able to get to that and through that challenging chapter, to now see you are ready right now. You weren't ready 2 years ago. You weren't ready 2015 when maybe a year after you pushed the poetry to the side. And I think that's a big thing for people to understand, is like, even if you're not fully ready right now, that's okay. You shouldn't push yourself or pressure yourself to be ready for something, where once you kind of step back and allow life to work the way it's supposed to, and it's going to, the suppose is how it's going to plan itself out and work itself out. Now, you're in a spot where you and your wife have the business and you guys have gotten burnt out from different things. But it sounds like you've also gotten to the point where you've seen all that, you've experienced all those things, to have the perspective of, well, now I can feel this differently on this side, because you had those perspectives. So in the time that we have left, talk a few minutes about what it is that you guys are doing and the work that you're doing.
Well, yeah. Well, to your point too, it's like you can't skip the first mountain to just go straight to the second mountain. And sometimes we'll occasionally work with someone. We'll have a client perhaps who it's like you actually do have to have an ego to be able to break free from an ego. And there is this concept with the Enneagram called ego strengthening. There's some people who are so traumatized for long periods of time that they actually just don't even have a clear personality. And you have to like really work on finding that groundedness in the first place. But yeah. So I think, we need to find the emptiness of the first mountain before we can go, oh yeah, it's just an endless parade of shoulds. Um the work we do is in transformation. We've been doing a lot of coaching work. Um I don't know if it's worth going, but we're pivoting in a couple of different directions where Shelley is moving into developing an AI, developing a really compelling AI assist who, because in some ways, it not only is it where the future's going, but it's if it can aid and like improve the outcomes that people who engage with us get, then it can be fascinating and an exciting, crazy territory. My lane is really continuing the one-to-one coaching and the workshops and the retreat experiences.
Nice. So the people that you work with and just the experiences that you've had, out of all the things that you've gone through and that you've intellectualized, but also gotten into your somatically into your body, what's that piece of advice you'd give to somebody that's on their path towards self mastery?
Well, hmm. I mean, you can't think your way. You can't read your way through a bunch of self-help books, and because you can speak the language, know it, you do have to have practices. You really do you have to still yourself. And so overall, I mean, in a word, I would just say be receptive, be open. This having resistance and thinking that you're like you sort of have it figured out or scoffing at the silliness of it is just a sign that there's something that's knocking, but you're pushing it unconsciously, perhaps subconsciously, away for whatever defended reasons that you may need to do at this time in your life. Inevitably, we come up against struggle and suffering and setbacks, and we're confronted with, is this still working for us? And most people end up in one form or another just insisting upon it and practicing the swing they've always known. But some people begin to yield and open up, and then it doesn't like make your life perfect, as James Hollis says. He actually, in his humility, James Hollis has written like 19 books on the midlife passage, and he's like, but I do promise you it'll make life more interesting. Which is a pretty humble
Yeah,
thing to say,
understatement.
but yeah.
Oh man, well that's awesome. I appreciate that advice, and it's been awesome having you on. I'm sure we could just keep going, but before I
Yeah.
let you go, where can people find you, and where can they connect with you?
Well, they can find us at Big Self School, and I think a really helpful book that could speak to people as well as really elucidate this Enneagram thing for them is my book, Shock Point: The Enneagram and Burnout and Stress. It was written, there is a section on burnout, there is a section on stress to contextualize it a little bit, because sometimes we act out our personalities the most when we are in stress, and we just kind of default to our old patterns. But this the book is there. You can find subtype information and a few other sources, but I do hammer down on the subtypes. And I think it's a really democratic, like easily accessible book. So if they're, you want to add it to your Enneagram library, or if you're just a first time curious seeker, check it out. I think you can get it for like half price on Amazon even right now. So yeah, but bigselfschool.com is where to find us. It's real easy.
Awesome. Again, Chad, it's been awesome to having you on here. I appreciate your time today. Thank you.
It's been an honor and a privilege, and I love your show, and thanks for the great work you're doing, Nick. It's really, I'm sure your audience must really value it too.